On June 5th, 1966, James Meredith, the same James Meredith who had become the first known black to graduate from the University of Mississippi, took an historic walk.
Dressed in short-sleeved shirt, pith helmet, and sunglasses, Meredith started a walk against fear. He wanted to walk from Memphis, Tennessee, to his home deep in the heart of Mississippi.
The purpose of my march is twofold. I want to inspire Mississippi Negroes to register and vote, and to conquer the fear that myself and they feel while living and traveling in Mississippi. If I can conquer this fear myself, maybe they can too.
James Meredith never completed his 220-mile journey. 2 days and 28 miles later, he was shot in the back as he walked along U.S. Highway 51 in Mississippi.
Shocked civil rights leaders assembled followers to continue Meredith's march. With them was SNCC's new president, 24-year-old Stokely Carmichael.
Martin Luther King led the Meredith March, but it was the fiery Carmichael who shouted in a new period of black activity.
Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. We want black power. 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 We want black power.
The cry of black power made the nation nervous, but Carmichael's phrase was not a new idea in American history, although it was new to the civil rights movement of the 60s. Black power in America was more than 100 years old. It went back to the colonization movement of the 1850s. Martin R. Delaney, a black doctor, author, and abolitionist, proposed plans for black colonies in Canada and Central and South America. Said Delaney, "Black is beautiful. Black power."
In the 1890s, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner of the African Methodist Episcopal Church in Georgia called for a Back to Africa movement. He told blacks to move to Africa and set up a black government. Black power.
Perhaps the most famous supporter of black power was Marcus Garvey. In 1911, Garvey began the Universal Negro Improvement Association to promote his Back to Africa plans. Garvey appealed to many blacks by preaching black economic independence and black nationhood, black power.
In 1960, Elijah Muhammad founded the Nation of Islam, better known as the Black Muslims. The Muslims program sought total black separation from white America.
Black Muslims ignored the civil rights groups springing up across the nation. They concentrated on building businesses and education in the black ghetto, and they trained their strongest young men in karate and self-defense. Black power.
In the early 1960s, another black man rose to fame with his calls for black nationalism. His name was Malcolm X.
Malcolm X became a public figure as a black Muslim. As a Muslim minister, he preached the doctrine of separation of blacks and whites. But Malcolm took the Muslims far beyond their original ideas. He believed the Muslims could join other black groups in playing an important role in the struggle for civil rights.
What you and I need to do is to learn to forget our differences. When we come together, we don't come together as Baptists or Methodists. You don't catch hell because you're a Baptist, and you don't catch hell because you're a Methodist. You catch hell because you're a black man. You catch hell, all of us catch hell for the same reason.
In 1964, Malcolm X left the black Muslims and founded his own Muslim Mosque Incorporated in New York. He traveled all over the country explaining his philosophy of black nationalism.
All of us have suffered here in this country political oppression at the hands of the white man, economic exploitation at the hands of the white man, and social degradation at the hands of the white man. Now, in speaking like this, it doesn't mean that we're anti-white, but it does mean we're anti-exploitation, we're anti-degradation, we're anti-oppression. You let the white man walk around here talking about how rich this country is, but you never stop to think how it got rich so quick. It got rich because you made it rich. This is our investment. This is our contribution. our blood. Civil rights for those of us whose philosophy is black nationalism means give it to us now. Don't wait for next year. Give it to us yesterday. And that's not fast enough.
Malcolm X turned the bitterness and anger of the black ghetto into words. Poor blacks listened and said, "He speaks for us."
All about me, sure as you please, children.
In June 1964, Malcolm X founded the Organization of Afro-American Unity. He planned to take the case of oppressed Afro-Americans before the United Nations. He tried to enlist the aid of African nations in his drive for black unity. His plans were stopped by a bullet.
On February 21st, 1965, in New York, Malcolm X was shot while giving a speech.
Even in death, Malcolm X's power was felt. He became a hero to young blacks throughout the world. His words and actions inspired men like Stokely Carmichael to settle for nothing less than full and immediate equality. Black power.
We must build strength and pride among ourselves. We must think politically and get power, because we are the only people in this country that are powerless. We don't control anything but what white people say we can control. We have to be able to smash any political machine that's oppressing us and bring it to its knees. We have to organize ourselves to speak for each other. That's black power.
Carmichael's vision of black power became the most discussed slogan in the country. Many blacks rejected it, as they had rejected the earlier calls for black separation.
But Carmichael realized that a new generation of young blacks accepted his cry of black power. The same young blacks who had been victims of white brutality and violence in the civil rights movement. The same young blacks who were tired of marching long distances with little gains. The same young blacks whose rage and frustrations erupted into flames in the summer of 1965 in the black ghetto of Los Angeles. Watts.
Nearly 500,000 blacks were crowded into Watts in August of 1965. 2/3 were high school dropouts. 1 out of 3 had no jobs. Watts residents felt hemmed in by white policemen. Only 5 of the 205 policemen in Watts were black. Nothing seemed to be going right for the people who lived there. Pressures built until finally, on August 11th, 1965, the explosion began. It started when Marquette Fry, a 21-year-old black, was arrested for drunken driving.
The arrest set off 5 days of uncontrolled fury. Blacks attacked whites and police, looted and burned buildings, and took over the streets. When it was over, 34 people were killed, 1,000 injured, 4,000 arrested. 13,000 National Guard troops had been brought in.
$40 million worth of property was damaged. 200 businesses were totally destroyed.
The fear that one Watts after another would explode across the country was in many minds when Stokely Carmichael cried, "Black Power." And at the same time, another organization was taking shape that was building another form of black power. Its symbol, the Black Panther.
The Black Panther Party was formed in Oakland, California, just after the Watts riot. It aimed to protect ghetto residents from abuses by white police. The Black Panthers openly carried guns, but only, they said, to defend themselves and other blacks from white policemen.
One eloquent Panther spokesman was a tall, bearded, self-educated black named Eldridge Cleaver. Cleaver was a Panther National Minister of Information. In an interview, Cleaver described the Panthers' program.
We are not willing to accept the rules of the white establishment. We want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our black community. We want full employment for our people, housing fit for the shelter of human beings. We want all black men to be exempt from military service. We want decent education for black people, education that teaches us the true nature of this decadent, racist society.
The Panther organization spread to cities across the country: Chicago, Boston, New York were a few. The nation became more aware each day that racism and segregation were as serious in the North as they were in the South.
The same pressure as Watts. Poor jobs, poor educational opportunities, poor housing, poor futures were still at work. In the summer of 1966, riots broke out in Chicago, and in 1967, riots tore Detroit, leaving a record high of 43 dead, 5,000 arrested, and $200 million worth of property destroyed. Dozens of cities suffered similar outbreaks.
The pattern in such riots was clear. They started with an incident involving police and ghetto residents. Usually, the incident was minor, but it quickly grew as crowds of angry blacks appeared on the scene.
After the Watts explosion, President Lyndon Johnson had appointed a commission to study urban violence. Called the President's Commission on Civil Disorders, it made its report after 18 months of investigation. Illinois Governor Otto Kerner, head of the commission, summed up the commission's conclusions in a few phrases.
Our nation is moving toward two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. Discrimination and segregation have long permeated much of American life. They now threaten the future of every American. Segregation and poverty have created in the racial ghetto a destructive environment totally unknown to most white Americans.
The commission blamed white racism for being at the bottom of ghetto riots. Many whites refused to believe it. They thought the Kerner report went too far. Blacks thought the report did not go far enough.
Kerner Commission report was important because for the first time a government commission blamed whites for black unrest. And while the nation pondered what to do with the report, Martin Luther King went to Memphis, Tennessee in April 1968.
Black garbage men in Memphis were on strike for more money. Dr. King led his marches through Memphis to pressure the city into supporting the workers.
But Dr. King hadn't counted on the uncontrolled militancy of some of the black youths in his movement. During one march, several young blacks raced through downtown Memphis, breaking windows and looting stores. One person was killed, and 4,000 National Guardsmen were called in to restore the peace. On April 3rd, Dr. King made this prophetic statement: "We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I have been to the mountaintop."
The next day, Martin Luther King was dead.
Memphis tonight is a battleground in the wake of the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King. The father of the nonviolent sect within the civil rights movement was shot by a sniper early this evening in Memphis as Dr. King stood on the second-floor balcony of his motel room in the downtown area. Dozens of police seemed to converge on the motel within seconds. The fire department...
Like anybody, I would like to live
Joseph Hospital about a mile and a half
a
away.
long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will.
I was downstairs in the courtyard of the motel.
And what happened?
And Dr. King came out of the room on his way to a dinner engagement at Reverend Kyle's home. And we heard a shot ring out. I thought it was a firecracker until I looked up and saw him laying flat on his back. As soon as I got up there, I realized that it was probably a fatal wound.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? At 7:10 this evening, Martin Luther King was shot in Tennessee. This was to be a gala occasion for a little Negro college from Mississippi appearing in Carnegie Hall with the great Duke Ellington. Martin Luther King, 20 minutes ago, died. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up
live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
But I don't mind dying for you, America. I'll die for you if necessary because I love you.
Martin Luther King, the symbol of nonviolence, died violently. The nation, black and white, rocked with emotion.
America is shocked and saddened by the brutal slaying tonight of Dr. Martin Luther King. I ask every citizen to reject the blind violence that has struck Dr. King, who lived by nonviolence.
I will never teach any of you to hate white people. This is not the meaning of our movement. I'm teaching you to love those who hate us and love those who love us. Love everybody because God says love.
Well, I think it's one of the most shameful, dastardly acts that have been perpetrated upon black people. And I think more and more people are going to begin to listen to our Stokely Carmichael and Ralph Brown because they're beginning to make more and more sense.
While America killed Dr. King last night, she made a whole lot easier for a whole lot of black people today. There no longer needs to be intellectual discussions.
Senator Robert Kennedy, who was to die in the same way a few months later, cried out against the violence that many felt was sweeping through the country.
Victims of the violence are black and white, rich and poor, young and old, famous and unknown. They are, most important of all, human beings whom other human beings loved and needed. No one, no matter where he lives or what he does, can be certain who next will suffer from some senseless act of bloodshed. And yet it goes on and on and on in this country of ours. Why?
King's assassination sparked riots in 125 American cities from April 4th through April 11th. At least 46 people were killed. All but 5 were black. Over 3,000 people were injured. More than $55 million worth of property was destroyed.
Dr. King's death was for many young blacks the straw that broke the back of nonviolence. The late 1960s saw young blacks moving more and more towards the goal of black power and black separatism. The raised fist became the symbol of black power. In 1968, the Olympic Games became a political arena when 2 black American athletes showed their opposition to racism in America by giving a raised fist salute from the winner's stand in Mexico City. Black power had come to the Olympics, and many were shocked.
In May 1968, a group of black militants led by former SNCC leader James Foreman drafted a black manifesto demanding that white churches and synagogues pay reparations of $500 million to blacks for wrongs done them in the past. First, the Olympics, and now the churches. Black power had come full circle, touching almost every phase of American life. And yet, there is still misunderstanding about the concept. A word from Malcolm X.
Now, the political philosophy of black nationalism only means that the black man should control the politics and the politicians in his own community. And the politicians must also be made to take the responsibility for helping to eliminate the evils that afflict our people in our own community. And the economic philosophy of black nationalism only means that our people need to be re-educated into the importance of controlling the economy of our own community, controlling the economy of the community in which we live. And even when we try and spend the money in the neighborhood where we live, usually because we haven't learned the importance of owning and operating businesses, the businesses of our community are usually also controlled by outsiders. The stores are controlled by people who don't even live in our community. So even when we try and spend our money in the neighborhood where we live, we're spending it with someone who puts it in a basket and takes it out as soon as the sun goes down. So the economic philosophy of black nationalism puts the burden upon the black man of learning how to control his own economy. And the social philosophy of black nationalism means that we have to become socially mature to the point where we will realize the responsibility is upon us to elevate the condition, the standard of our community to a higher level. And we can only do this by working together in harmony and unity to in some way eliminate the evils that are destroying the moral fiber of our community. So as I said, just as it took nationalism to bring about the independence of our brothers and sisters in Africa and Asia, the goal or the objective of the political, social, and economic philosophy of black nationalism is designed to bring about the complete independence of the black people in this country by making us become consciously involved in controlling our own community. Once we can control our own communities now, then perhaps we will later be able to control our own country, control our own nation, and govern ourselves, and in some way have control over our own destiny. And this philosophy in itself will bring about the independent thinking of the black people in this country and eventually lead to the complete physical independence of the black people in this country.